Segment 3, Gold and Black Live, a longtime friend and a person I've admired. Oh, I don't know, you're not that old, Mark, but I seem like I admired you back to the 70s, 80s.
We're
And,
getting there.
yeah, we are getting there. That's the good thing. But Mark Montieth joins me, and Mark, Purdue fans know him from a number of things. He's been around Purdue basketball for decades, wrote the book Passion Play of the 1987-88 season. Has worked. What year it was this other year that you were around the team the entire year? Did you do another year?
I followed, two of Matt Painter's teams.
Right.
What was supposed to be Rob Hummels' senior year.
Right.
The injury on the first day of practice, and then the following year. And, those seasons didn't turn out to be book worthy, really. And there were a lot of complicating factors in that. But that was a great experience for me to be around those two teams and to see it from the inside. I like to feel I kind of got a graduate degree in sports writing from Gene Cady and Matt Painter, by being allowed total access to their programs and seeing it from the inside, because it's a much different perspective than just going and covering a game sitting in press row.
Yeah, and Passion Play is such an excellent book, and I still, and I've told you this 100 times probably over the years, I said I still remember the look on your face at Pontiac Silverdome after they did, Kansas State beats Purdue. You were always professional, but I thought, man, that book would have been really, really, really something on a national level if you win the national championship. Of course, Purdue was beaten by Kansas State in the Sweet 16 game up there. But what a great group of guys. I mean, at least in my impression of the Todd Mitchells and the Troy Lewises and the Mel McCants and Tony Jones and Steven Scheffler. That was yes, you're reporting on it, but those are a good group of guys to hang around with when you're covering a basketball team.
It really was a great group of guys, and it's been fun to be able to stay in touch over the years. I might go 20, 25 years without talking to one of them and then have an occasion to do so. And it's just like, we were together yesterday. So, gosh, I see Troy Lewis at a golf outing in Anderson back when we could do golf outings, and I've talked to Tony Jones on the phone. And I connected with Mel McCants on Facebook, and he had lost his copy of the book, so I sent one to Belgium for him. And Steve Scheffler I've talked to, Kip Jones, a lot of these guys. And it's great to be able to renew the acquaintance and to see what these guys are doing now. They've all done well. And so that's been part of the experience, too. It's been a lot of fun to stay in touch with these guys.
Yeah, Tom Dienar from our staff connected with Mel in Brussels, and a funny business story that he used his cell phone. And he said, hey, I'm going to call him, or I don't know how he connected with him, but to record an interview, and it was about $100 phone calls. It turned out on the cell phone, but Mel is. And Mel sounds like he's still the same affable guy who's a funny guy, and a really, really good basketball player. You watched college basketball for a long time and seen some of the great Indiana teams and the UCLA teams, et cetera. Obviously, this team did not make it to the Final Four, but it was in the era that, they didn't have NBA guys. Everett Stevens really probably, and Troy and Todd Mitchell, I guess, got a little bit of time in the NBA out of that group. Mel McCants did a little too. But where does that team, in terms of, put it in some kind of categorization of how good that team was? Was it really good, overachieved, or really good and it could stand with anybody, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it was, it was that good. It could stand with anybody because it has so much experience, more experience than college teams have today. Because you had Troy Lewis, Everett Stevens, Todd Mitchell were seniors. Mel McCants was a junior. Kip Jones was the junior. He had a lot of experience on that team to go with the talent, and they had developed such a chemistry. They had played together so much. So certainly one of the great teams in Purdue history, I would say, has to be top 5. It's hard to compare to a team like one that has Glenn Robinson, because he was an otherworldly talent, and certainly the 88 team had nobody of that individual caliber, but it had the team. It had great balance. It had good depth. So it's right up there. It's right up there. And that loss to Kansas State, a 3-point loss. K-State hit 8 out of 10 3-pointers. I always go back to this. Richmond banked a 3-pointer from the top. There's always elements of fate in a basketball game, and there are things outside of a coach's control, outside of a team's control. Certainly Purdue did, waver toward the end. There were some turnovers there, unforced turnovers that were a big factor. But, it really didn't play a bad game in that loss. They shot about 50% from the field. I have a theory, maybe you've heard that, me say it before, but I think it's usually a bad thing to get off to a great start.
Yeah, they got ahead.
Because you relax, the other team focuses and gets going. Well, Purdue jumped out to a 10-0 lead in that game and led by 9 at the half. In the second half, didn't have the same energy, the same drive. You start playing to protect the lead instead of charging to get a lead. And I think that was a factor too. So a lot of things went into that game, but we should remember that K-State had the future NBA Rookie of the Year in Mitch Richmond, and a couple other guys who played some of the NBA. So really, K-State had as much talent as Purdue did. They just took longer to come around. But certainly one of the more frustrating losses in Purdue's basketball history for Purdue fans.
Yeah, and of course, K-State loses the Elite Eight game to Kansas, and Danny and the Miracles go on and win the national championship. It seems so paved for Purdue. I mean, it was hard to minimize. It looked like, my gosh, that regional had Kansas State, a team you'd beaten by 29 points in the regular season, excuse me, and Kansas, and obviously Vandy in there as well. And Kansas, Kansas kind of almost barely made the tournament. I mean, that's not quite true, but they were kind of a throw, and they obviously had a great player in Danny Manning. But that was a tough one in terms of hard to reconcile, and yet that was a fantastic season of really unbelievable moments. The Purdue Indiana games, the games in Mackey Arena against Michigan to win the Big Ten championship up there, and in Mackey Arena, just incredible basketball games and a fervor. It was exposed like it is now, but it wasn't quite the same as it is now, where, it was a big deal when they brought the lights into Mackey Arena and had television coming in and all that.
Yeah. That was, I think that was the last year that there weren't permanent lights in Mackey Arena.
That's right.
Brought in for the national telecast, and it just lit the place up, and everybody liked it so much that it became a permanent fixture.
Yeah, absolutely. From that standpoint, all right. Ian, interesting, because you did follow around with Rob Hummel and Matt Painter. Is there a way to compare the two? I mean, one's a protege. Matt Painter obviously played for Gene Keady, was recruited by Gene Keady, has certainly had a Gene Keady influence, but they're very different guys. And you spent a lot of time with them, and Matt's maybe changed a little bit as everybody grows in a period of time. But tell me, compare and contrast the two in terms of what you think makes them actually different from one another.
Well, different personalities, certainly. Gene Keady is as fiery as you can get, very emotional on the sidelines. And whereas Matt Painter is capable of that, that's not really his standard demeanor. He doesn't try to fire up the players often by ranting and raving on the sideline. I think he likes to keep a cool head, keep his head of the game, think strategically, that type of thing. But certainly they share a lot of traits. I mean, their approach to the game is very similar. The emphasis on defense, man-to-man defense, get good shots, that kind of thing. But the game has changed so much over the years, particularly with, the three-point shot. As shooters get better, you have to incorporate the three-point shot more into your offense. And Matt Painter has obviously done that. So, I'm not one of these older guys who want to say players, they were better back then,
Yeah.
I think the players get better and better. The athleticism is amazing. Kids play year-round now, and you could argue against some of the characteristics of AAU basketball, but certainly kids get better. So you have to coach the game a different way. But, those two coaches share a philosophy about basketball. They're both humble, low-ego coaches, which is refreshing for people like you and me who cover the games. But certainly Painter is I guess you would say, calmer personality, and that reflects in their sideline demeanor.
Yeah, markmontieth.com also is a place to go and visit, because it is your bank of all your one-on-one shows. In addition to some other things, you've got some Purdue basketball film from the, what did you say, the dedication game at Mackey Arena. You've got the the 53-point game Rick Mount out at Iowa in January of 1970 as well. But that you've got so many terrific, unbelievable interviews. I think about the interview with Bob King and the interview with guys that Bob's been passed for 8 years, but those guys will be immortalized, and they tell so much of the story of Purdue basketball over the years. It's a common fabric, and obviously you went to Indiana, but you've been around Indiana basketball and Purdue basketball. That brand is pretty amazing. If you think about since 1980, you've had two coaches, and the brand really hasn't changed all that much from those guys.
No, that's right. Well, and how unusual is that to go that amount of time with two coaches? And I think it's pretty apparent Matt Painter can stay at Purdue as long as he wants. He could be there another 10 years or however long he wants to coach. So, that's a good thing. I mean, I don't think either of those coaches became complacent. So that's not a problem. And, you're always fighting to achieve something in the Big Ten. So you have to continue working and driving. But that's really unusual in this day and age. It used to be a guy like Tony Hinkle could stay at Butler forever, and you would see examples. But it's more rare now because you got to win. You can't be a nice guy who has good kids, who has a nice program, who wins now and then anymore. The fans will not permit that. So you've got to win fairly consistently. And, Matt's program took a dive, for a couple of years there, finished last 1 year, but he got it back going again. So no coach can hang on to a job for long if he's not having some real success fairly consistently.
Yeah. This year's team is an interesting one. It's a crazy year just by definition with COVID, but the Boilermakers have had really an interesting group. I mean, they've got 5 freshmen that are huge contributors. The future is extremely bright, it appears, with a couple top level recruits, probably some of Matt Painter's best recruits in terms of rankings, if you want to look at it that way, with Caleb Furst and Trey Kaufman-Renn coming in. What do you see from this team? And as they go through the rough and tumble Big Ten, the league is just absolutely loaded. But this team seems to be acquitting itself quite nicely so far, with so far what we've seen this year.
Yeah, no question. A really talented team. You see examples of their youth at times, like at Maryland. Yeah. They're losing some games you might think they shouldn't lose, but actually, when you're playing that many freshmen and sophomores, you're going to lose games like that. Experience really counts. So on the whole, they're having a really good season, and it is a bright future. Combine, the underclassmen on this team with the group coming in, it is very promising. I kind of wonder, all the guards he has, can you keep all these guys in your program? Because you got some really promising guys like Ethan Morton coming off the bench. You wonder where the playing time is going to go. That kind of thing tends to work itself out. But, boy, it's great to have that kind of depth. You've got a 7'3" freshman, with a lot of promise, not to mention Travion Williams, who has another year. So it's really an intriguing group, has great potential. It's going to have great depth. I think it's going to be a balancing act on Matt's part to kind of keep everybody satisfied with playing time. And some kids are going to have to accept lesser roles than they might have assumed they were going to have when they enrolled at Purdue. But still, there's a lot of bright days ahead for Purdue fans. They'll be in the mix. Nationally, they should be in the mix.
Yeah, the transfer rule is going to change some things as well, because you do wonder the guys that lose time next year at this time. It will be interesting to see. And yet he has – one thing I will say about Matt Painter's program is, from what I observe and watch, is he does a terrific job. He's done a great job of making it a family atmosphere. Gene Katie did that. You experienced that. I mean, in both situations. Gene Katie might have been a tough love family, but he really did treat you that way, and at least in my experience as well. Matt has a lot of those same qualities.
Yeah, no question. No question about it. It's because at their core, they're nice guys, and they treat people well. Like I say, they're a little program.
Yeah. losing you here a little bit on our transmission back and forth here for a second, but from an internet standpoint. But yeah, they are nice guys, and they are guys that seem to treat others well, and that seems to shows up on the way their teams play sometimes. Tell us a little bit about your projects. Obviously, you've working with the IBJ, the Indianapolis, is it Indianapolis or Indiana Business Journal? IBJ. Indianapolis Business Journal. Work with another famous sports writer from here, Mike Lepresti as well. But also your Pacers books are. I read your first one, and you're working maybe on another one about a little bit more about the championship seasons of the Indiana Pacers. Purdue has a tremendous two guys that had a big part of that story with Billy Keller and Rick Mount as well. You can never run short of Rick Mount stories. He's just a fascinating character as well.
Yeah. I did a book called Reborn that details how the Pacers came together in 1967 when the ABA was formed. And I go through the first two seasons when they kind of got the thing off the ground and established themselves as a force in the ABA. And, that got up to 400 pages, so it was time to quit. So I want to do a follow-up on the championship seasons of the Pacers. They won ABA titles in 1970, 72, and 73. But more than recount the games, I want to get into the personalities of the key players. So we're talking about Billy Keller, Rick Mount, George McGinnis, Darnell Hillman.
Yeah.
I had a 3-hour lunch with Darnell. Roger Brown's a fascinating character, and I wrote about him some of the previous book, but I've learned so much more since then. The life he had, of course, Mel Daniels. So I really wanted to get into the people, the personalities of those teams and what it was like in the city, because I grew up in Indianapolis. I went to some of those games as a kid. I know the excitement those teams generated, how they brought a lot of people together, how they helped advance the growth of downtown. They had to build a new arena downtown to accommodate the interest in this team. So that led to Market Square Arena, which really helped revitalize downtown. So a lot to talk about in that story. And I've gotten to know these guys over the years.
Yeah.
I've been talking with Rick quite a bit on the phone. I've talked with Billy Keller a lot. Been going over to George McGinnis's house, had lunch with Darnell. I've read all the Dayton newspapers about Roger Brown, who was banned from college and NBA, after his freshman season at Dayton. Learned a lot about him. So, it's interesting for me to research. I hope it will be interesting to read about.
Oh, I think it will be. It's funny because people of our era, that state of Indiana, these guys it was Indiana's team. I mean, obviously Indiana, IU, Hoosiers, and Purdue were big, but this was just such personalities, and you've identified so many of them, and it'll be a definite read for me, because it's something that a big part of my childhood, watching that 3-pointer. That was a big deal. And that red, white, and blue basketball was a lot of fun. To watch. And how many of those basketballs I bought and wore out on the driveway is I never got very good, but I sure loved to play. And they had a lot to do with that. Certainly the Pacers and basketball in this state. Mark, we always.
It's funny.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you talk about the red, white, and blue ball. It's funny to me that the NBA sticks with that brown ball, but every other league, professional league, feels the need to have a multicolored ball, whether it's the WNBA, the G League, European leagues. They all have at least 2 different colors on the ball. I don't see why the NBA wouldn't bring back the red, white, and blue ball. I don't think anybody has the copyright on it. I think they could do it. They would have to admit that somebody else had a better back in the day. But I think it'd be, gosh, they'd sell a lot of balls, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, it was a lot of fun to watch, and such great basketball in its day. Well, Mark, again, thanks so much for your time. We really enjoy it. I try to make sure I get Mark on at least once a year, because we barely scratch the surface. But do check out markmontieth.com, because if you're a Purdue fan, there's a lot of Purdue stuff, many Purdue folks that you interviewed over the years, and Purdue content as well as just great sports personalities and great stories as well. So Mark, thanks again so much, and I trust you're staying safe and well during this pandemic too. So we appreciate that. I want to thank our sponsors, Triple X, on the hill, but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929. Hilton Garden Inn, when tomorrow's a big day. See you at HDI tonight. State Farm agent Trent Johnson at trentismyagent.com. Gordon and Scott and all the folks at WLFI for making this happen. We'll be back next week for more fun and frolic on Gold and Black Live. We appreciate the opportunity to do that. So, Mark, again, thanks again, and have a great week.
Thanks, Alan.